The Liberal Democrat MP Layla Moran has come out as pansexual after beginning a relationship with a woman. The MP, who announced the news on social media, said coming out in the context of being a politician had been slightly more difficult than telling her friends and family. She criticised Parliament as a weird, backwards place for LGBTQ people. Well, let's talk more about all of this to journalist and LGBT activist Benjamin Butterworth. Benjamin, thanks for coming in.
Good afternoon.
First, pansexual. Can you just run us through exactly what that means in the context of all the other options available?
Yeah, I think a lot of people haven't heard this term pansexual before. It's quite unfamiliar to most people. I know my gran texted this morning saying, what's the difference between this and bisexual? Because Layla Moran had dated a man before and now she's in a relationship with a woman. So pansexual comes from the Latin pan, which means all. And so it means you're attracted to, in Layla Moran's words, someone regardless of gender, or any gender if you consider that there are more than two genders. Whereas bisexual would mean traditionally you're attracted to men and women, but essentially that you're attracted to two genders. And so what Layla Moran has said is that when she fell in love with this woman, she realised that it wasn't about the fact that she was a woman, it was about the person inside that she was attracted to.
And just before we go on to some of the other things she said about Parliament and so on, just on the kind of all other genders, how many genders are there nowadays?
Well, I mean, it's questionable. Some people say there's up to 100 genders, but I think the important thing to take from this, whether it's about how many sexualities you refer to or how many genders you refer to, is that these labels are a means of someone expressing how they identify and how they see themselves in the world and who they're attracted to. You know, in the interview that Layla Moran did with the website Pink News, she said that she doesn't actually like labels, but it's an important way to explain who she is. And I think that's the critical thing to take away from this. You know, some people might be questioning about whether there are all those different identities, but it's people just being who they are and trying to explain it.
And then she's trying to explain it within the context of being an MP, and she said that's slightly harder than with family and friends, and that Parliament is a weird place.
Yeah.
What's your sense of that?
Well, I think Parliament is a weird place, regardless of anything to do with sexuality. But it's interesting because our Parliament in Westminster has best part of 50 openly LGBTQ plus MPs. So that's the most diverse in terms of sexuality in any Parliament in the world. Second only is the Scottish Parliament. And so I think the fact that this is a story says a lot about how unfamiliar we are with some of the smaller identities. She says that some people in Parliament have said she shouldn't have announced that she was pansexual because it might get her criticism, it might be controversial, it might be unpopular. And I think that reveals a lot about some of the small c conservatism that still exists. But we should celebrate our Parliament, in my opinion, because, you know, there's about 45 gay and bisexual members of Parliament. Now, when I was 5 years old in 1997, we had the first openly gay person who stood for election that was elected. So we've come a long way in just 20 years.
And I suppose with a conversation like the one we're having today, started by her announcement, it just makes it more possible for all of this to be talked about more readily, both in Parliament and beyond. Because
even though terms like pansexual might be unfamiliar to a lot of people, it doesn't mean that they don't exist and that people don't identify as that. And I think what's great about a politician doing this is that they can be a bit of a role model. People at home that were unsure about explaining it to their family, they can now have someone to give an example of, someone in an esteemed position that does well with a great job, and say, well, they're pansexual and I'm pansexual too. And I think that's why it's a positive news story.
Benjamin, thank you.